Defcon 3, I'm KT McFarland. President Obama has said no U.S. boots on the ground to defeat ISIS. Yet Senator Graham and other military leaders have said, you're not going to do this without boots on the ground. Which one is it? To join us to make some sense out of this is Tony Cordesman. He's from the Center for Strategic and International Studies and one of the most respected analysts of military engagement in the United States. Tony, what do you think? Boots on the ground, no boots on the ground?
To some extent, this is a false debate because people are talking about this as if you could put major combat units into Iraq and Syria. You can't. There's a problem with time, there's a problem with the area to be covered, but above all, sending U.S. troops into the middle of a civil war between Iraqi Sunnis and Shiites, or a Syrian civil war between Alawites and Sunnis, is a recipe for disaster. The fact is that one way or another, if we're going to do this, the ground component has to be Iraqi. And to have an Iraqi component, you have to change the government. You have to have a government that can bring the various factions together. If we put U.S. troops in, we'd be seen essentially by one or all sides as the enemy every time we used force. And we are already, because of what happened in the past, unpopular in the areas we'd have to fight. But there's another debate here entirely which many of the people in the military see. It's not big U.S. combat units versus no combat units. The president seems to have decided no special forces, no forward advisors, no one to go into these combat units as they go into combat, the Iraqi forces, or into the new Sunni units we're trying to create, or the Kurdish units we're trying to strengthen. And there are at least reports that the chiefs strongly recommended that we put those types of boots on the ground. Very small numbers of expert advisors embedded with the combat forces that are necessary to deal with the Islamic State units.
Tony, if you look at what the president's talked about, forming a coalition of moderate Sunni states, not to include Iran, not to include Assad of Syria, to take the moderate Sunni rebels, whoever they are, the Syrian rebels, whoever they are, take them to Saudi Arabia and to train them up into a fighting military force. Is this just a bridge too far? Or is this hoping for something that's never going to happen, either Syrian rebels or a coalition of countries which will put their boots on the ground?
A lot of this coalition is an exercise in political symbolism, and it's important as such. A lot of it is in a political and economic dimension. It's shutting off foreign volunteers, cutting down the money, ending the trade. That really is critical. No one has really suggested you're going to see other Arab forces on the ground aside from Iraqi and Syrian forces. The Iraqi forces we may well be able to make work. The problem really was Maliki virtually destroyed those as forces that were national, turned them into forces that were loyal to him and forces that were abusing the Sunnis and weren't working with the Kurds. We hope the new government can change that. It'll take time, it'll take advisors, but that is something we feel we can really make progress on. When it comes down to Syria, I think there is a little sort of climate of illusion here. We'd like to be able to build up moderate rebels. But the fact is, it's very doubtful we can create a strong enough force to make that much of a difference. What we're really hoping is a combination of the airstrikes on the Islamic State in Syria, some elements of moderate rebels, and the other rebel movements which in many ways hate the Islamic State as much as they hate Assad, can destroy the Islamic State. But at the end of it, you'll have nothing approaching a unified Syria, and the problems we've had in the past between divided rebels and the Assad regime, those are almost certain to remain.
If Iraq were to stand up, like you've talked about, we would help them form a more inclusive government that would get buy-in from the Sunnis, buy-in from the Kurds. What happens to Iran in all this? Even if we were to succeed, would Iran be the big winner?
Well, it's a good question. I think the answer is probably not. If you have a unified Iraq, the memories of the Iran-Iraq War still are a key issue. And you do not have a Shiite religious structure, an Arab Shiite structure in Iraq that sees Persians and Iranians that believe in a supreme leader when they're Shiites as sort of a natural ally. The question really is going to be how strong, how nationalist will this new government be? How closely will it then be tied to the other Arab states, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Jordan? How closely will it be tied to us? But it's a good question because it's going to be a contest. There'll be a question of, at some point, will Iran try to turn against us as we succeed and they lose their fear of a weakened Islamic State? Or will it wait for us to leave and hope it can exploit the situation? And like almost every aspect of this operation, there are serious risks and major uncertainties, and we simply can't predict the outcome.